My GF cheated. I never let her forget. Part 3. Lisa was forced to take an extended medical leave due to the despair and mental health concerns she was suffering as a result of the circumstance. She was contemplating suicide. She was even put on medicine and had to lose a lot of weight. She started to seem really ill. The whole situation was tormenting her, and the more she suffered, the better I felt. At this time, I'd already done more harm to myself than she had to me, but I'd gotten to the sensation of power. I spent no time dealing with my own feelings or moving on from what had transpired. All I wanted was more vengeance, and I couldn't stop myself. Lisa eventually gets a hold of me after weeks of ignoring her messages and phone calls by showing up unexpectedly late at night at my place. She came there to pick up some belongings she had left behind from her previous residence to take home with her. She was a local, and her parents lived nearby. She was still on medical leave and no longer lived on campus, but with her parents. I told her I would transport her belongings to her parents' home that weekend, but I couldn't allow her in since I had company, which I did, but it wasn't one of her teammates or pals. I then proceeded to collect all of the stuff I had gathered from all of the females over the course of many weeks. There were maybe 8 or 9 items from various females, including her teammates, and they put their goods in with Lisa's into large black garbage bags. I delivered the bags to her residence and then contacted Lisa's father. I informed him that I had placed her belongings on his doorstep and that I had informed his wicked daughter. Lisa's father and I got along well, and he even supported me when Lisa and I split up. But after all of these experiences, he clearly had a poor view of me. I receive a call from Lisa 15 minutes after I hang up with her father. I respond because I'm curious about her response to seeing all of this other female's trash mixed up with hers. She couldn't stop weeping. It sounded like that crazy half-crying, half-mumbling thing people do. She wasn't even upset, only pleading with me to point to end my tyranny. I just grinned and basked in the ecstasy of hearing her anguish. I said, "Why were there other men involved in our relationship? You incorporated them into our relationship in the same way that I included other ladies into your stuff." It's the ideal sarcastic metaphor. At the time, I thought it sounded great and was really pleased with myself. Facepalm. Lisa was sure I was the one cheating on her since I was usually out of town, according to one of Lisa's friends, who knew she was cheating on me throughout our relationship. This doesn't make sense since I was out of town for basketball, which is a perfectly legitimate explanation. Not haphazardly on my own will. My timetable was actually available on the school's website. I remained in touch with her while I was away, but I couldn't be on my phone during practice or team meetings. But I assume she didn't have the logic in her head to figure this out. I'm guessing it's simply an explanation she concocted to cover up her concerns about the entire thing or to keep her face in front of others who knew she was cheating. Months pass. Lisa returns to school after being on medical leave, and we run into each other in the physical therapy center in our athletic facilities building. This presents me with another chance. I hadn't done anything to injure her in a long time, but I was still thirsty for revenge. I then act as though I wished to renew our relationship. She is wary at first, but after about a week, she bites. We begin to repair our friendship. We've been dating for about a month, but I wouldn't call it a relationship. I restrict her from having any male friends, and she is not permitted to go out and party with her girlfriends. I also need constant access to all of her accounts and her whereabouts. It resembled a hostage scenario. It provided me with a feeling of control. Meanwhile, I'm not being too loyal. This was always my intention. Finally, she discovers my affair with a girl in one of her courses, and we have a violent breakup. I told her that she actually remembers what it was like to be me when we were dating. I felt victorious again. It was simply another opportunity to injure her, and I took it. Following this, we don't communicate for years. I finish university and relocate to Central America. She contacts me when I'm there, roughly a year after I relocated and about 2 years after our last conversation. My life has devolved into that of a true degenerate at this point. I was consuming enormous quantities of narcotics on a regular basis, and I spent around 75% of my time participating in illegal or criminal activities. But I still blame her for my being the evil soul that I was and for refusing to accept responsibility for my bitter, immoral personality. I hadn't had another relationship since she and had always had problems since I couldn't trust a woman in any form. Even though it had been years, I regarded her texting me as yet another chance to damage her. We start talking as friends and even flirt with one another on Facebook Messenger. To be sure, there are several nations, states, and an ocean between us at this time. I had planned a visit to my former institution to see some pals. But what I told her was different. I told her I was returning to the city for a new job I had recently been given. We agreed to meet up when I returned to see whether there is anything worth salvaging between us. I put on my finest acting hat and seem to have put our history behind us. But I'm still as furious as I was years ago. She is in her last year at university, and I'm returning to the United States. When I arrive, I meet Lisa in a coffee shop. We stay up all night together. From her perspective, it seems that we have moved beyond our disagreements in what transpired. We may be able to sort things out. However, like I have said, I will not be returning. I'll just be here for 2 nights. She is unaware of this. After up a few times and spending 2 days together, I pack my belongings and board a plane back to Central America without telling her anything about my departure. I blocked her on all of my social media platforms and contact channels. This time, all I could think about was what happened to her when I'd vanished after she believed I had moved back and was ready to give our relationship another go. This time, though, it wasn't as gratifying as my past vengeance schemes. Every year, my drug habit and lifestyle deteriorated. 3 years later, I was hospitalized and almost died as a result of my long-term drug usage. I was never sober for a complete 24 hours following that day on the menstruation calendar. Reflecting. Regardless of how much anguish I may have given her with my vindictive existence, my new persona, which had replaced mine old one, was contaminated with a wicked spirit at heart. I honestly believe that my acts caused more damage to myself and lead me down a path where I had no morals. Though I spent the most of my narrative telling everyone about how I kept getting vengeance on my ex for cheating on me, as wonderful as it was, I wish I had spent an equal amount of time mending myself from the occurrence. If anybody reading this is suffering from the agony of infidelity, a good revenge narrative may provide some solace, but I hope you don't make the same mistake I made. Rather, devote more effort to mending and moving on from your pain. You will not be healed by vengeance. It will be a distinct trip, but it may divert your attention away from putting yourself back together. Fortunately, I became clean and have been sober for almost 4 years. I'd even had a 2-year-old female buddy cheat on me before I became clean, but didn't get even. I spent my time recuperating. I transformed and became only concerned with myself, which was much more rewarding than the vengeance I exacted on Lisa for cheating on me. Now I've been married to a sober lady for over 2 years, and wow, do I have a nice life. I have a fantasy job and a fantasy marriage. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read this. Sorry if it wasn't well written. I seldom write like much, but I never recounted the whole tale in depth before, and I learned a lot by writing it. The main thing I want to gain out of this is to share my experiences doing bad things, but getting such a gratifying sensation from it that it's nearly addicting, and transforming from a basically decent person to a really dark, nasty one. People have bad periods, of course, but I feel like my personality and mentality have never been the same since that incident. I'm looking forward to hearing from anybody who is willing to read this nonsense. Edit 1. Hello everyone. It's been a little over 100 days since I wrote this, and I'm still amazed at how many people read it. I appreciate all of the comments, even if they were a bit of a mixed bag. It's expanded to Facebook and YouTube, among other places, and it's fascinating to see how different the feeling is on each of those networks. Have you apologized or spoken to Lisa after the events in this story? Is one of the most frequent requests I've received. No, it does not. No, not yet. However, I intend to do so. She's on a lengthy list of changes I've been working on for years. It seems that I will return to her city sometime next year, and I'll contact her then. I know many of you are asking me not to, but I have discussed this with my sponsor, therapist, and mentors, and the conclusion is to apologize for my behavior, which I believe is necessary. Also, a lot of comments in which people totally misunderstand the purpose of the story's narrative and feel the need to act as my therapist or something telling me how I should have done this or that over a decade ago, which was not the point. It's apparent how I responded, but that's not what this was about. This was about objective reflection, and as I indicated in my post, I've gone back into dating after a long break from Lisa. And although most of my girlfriends and relationships following Lisa were nice, I was cheated on again in a manner with one of them, and was far more distressing than the narrative I wrote with Lisa. But I had learned from Lisa's experience and chose not to seek vengeance, and instead just walked away. That is when I ultimately became clean, which led to the life I currently enjoy. And I'm thinking of producing a post to illustrate the tale, since I ended up doing the healthier thing, even though I was wounded more than with Lisa. The sheer number of men who reached out to me on here, sharing their own stories of infidelity and drug abuse, either asking for advice or just to share their own emotions and stories, completely surprised me and honestly filled my heart with empathy, and I felt connected to people dealing with the same things I did back then, and it was so fulfilling to have the opportunity to help these men deal with their trauma in healthier ways than I originally did. But regardless of how different your comments are, I appreciate them all. However, I believe that all of the following arguments have some validity.